Hello, RDs and RDs to be. Welcome to RD Exam Ready Live. I'm Zach Caseberg. I'm your tutor, your coach, your guide, and I'm here to teach you during our live session today. So, if you are joining us today live, thank you so much for being here. It shows that you're really showing that initiative to get better at studying for the exam, learn how to go ahead and go through this process, and especially if you're showing up today, it means that you want to learn more about getting better at practice questions. So, that's going to be our plan for our session tonight. If you've joined us before, you know that we like to take some time with our practice questions to really prepare you as much as we possibly can for exam day. Now, just to kind of tell you a little bit about our plans for today, what I've done is I've written up a couple handfuls of questions for us to work on together. My plan is I'm going to pop a question right in front of you, and you're going to pretend like it's exam day and a question just popped right in front of you, too. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to start with that question just so you can get kind of a jump on it yourself. And then I'll start working through it myself as if I'm sitting there right there with you on exam day as well. Then we'll go through the question and talk through why we got to that best answer. What I really want you to take from today is learning more about your test taking strategy. Today is not meant to assess you or say whether you're doing good or bad on anything. It's really just to see, hey, how does this strategy work for you? A lot of the times when I'm teaching and tutoring students, I teach them greatly about what's called the process of elimination. Process of elimination is just being a really common standardized method for eliminating bad answers and statistically putting yourself in the best position to pick the best answer. And that's what I really recommend for your practice as well. Practice makes perfect. And this is really something that I took well when I studied for the exam itself, too. So you better have your scratch paper handy, your calculator, and your brain ready to go. As we do these questions, when you get to your best answer, I want you to somehow hold yourself accountable. Post it into the chat, speak it into the ether, write it on your sheet, in some way record it for yourself so you know what your best answer was and why. Then we're going to come together and talk through it. Also, you need to use that chat function to primarily communicate with me tonight. So if you have questions, if I'm not being clear, please be as open as possible and let us know how we can help you better to understand this. Make sure you check out the podcast, subscribe on the YouTube, rate, review, subscribe, and let me know what else you're interested in seeing as we come up through here. All right. Well, if you have everything nice and prepared, it's about time we started with our questions here. So let me get my everything pulled up for you as we go through it. Perfect. Good. And then if you give me just a moment here, I'm going to move myself up so you can still see me just a little bit as we go through this. Maybe not too much. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. All right. So for our first question here, I'm going to start by giving you that 30 seconds to start yourself. Then I'm going to jump in with you and we're going to go through it together here. Okay, everyone. So we're a little above our 30-second mark here. So I don't see any answers into the chat. So we could be kind of still working through it a little bit. But if you feel up to it, post that answer in the chat of what you feel is going to be your best answer here. All right. Good. See some answers rolling in there. Very good. Very good. So let's go ahead and start in. And I'm going to pretend like I'm sitting with you on exam day here. So I'm going to write A, B, C, and D. As I've told students before, I know I'm a broken record, but what I've told you before is that a lot of the times during the exam, I wrote this out on my whiteboard A, B, C, D 125 times, every time, because it statistically put me in the best position to get the right answer. So even if I had to guess, I statistically had a better odds of getting it right. And that's what I like to see much of the time. So as I start through, a decrease in basal metabolic rate can be caused by A, an increase in lean body mass. Hmm. Now I think through in my mind and I go, increase lean body mass probably means increase in muscle. And to me, if I have more muscle in general, I would like to think my body is a bit more higher on the metabolic rate. So to me, right off the bat, A just feels like a bad fit. And that's one that I'm going to rule out here because I don't think it's going to be a good fit there. B, a fever. Hmm. Well, a fever definitely wouldn't decrease my metabolic rate. I know it can give you chills a little bit, but no, it's not actually slowing anything down. If anything, I think a fever would speed things up. And so to me, I would think a metabolic rate would increase as a result of a fever. C, younger age. I'm going to put a little question mark by C for right now. And D, a decrease in lean body mass. So that would mean I am losing muscle in some way. If I think about what I said for A, which increase in lean body mass would mean increase in metabolic rate, decrease in lean body mass should go the other direction. So if I'm questionable between C and I feel better about D, if I really had to guess here, folks, it's a 50-50 shot, which is great odds. However, I think I need to go with what I feel best with, which in this case, I agree with most of you, would be answer D as our best fit here. So let's talk about why. It's really understanding the why as far as this goes here as well. So when we start with increase in lean body mass, I'm just going to make a quick edit here for us here, if you don't mind, on the fly. So with A, as I said, that's going to cause an increase in lean body mass, an increase in lean body mass. So that increase in lean body mass, that's going to cause an increase in your basal metabolic rate. It's going to be much more active as it's acting through there. The same would be said for a fever. Things that would do this, like fever, nicotine, caffeine, these are all things that are going to pump up that metabolic rate and get it nice and active. As I grab my caffeine here. C, younger age. Now, I was questionable about C. Maybe I just didn't feel as confident on it. But when I look at C on there, I would say, younger age, usually you're going to have a lot more lean body mass. You're going to be moving more. To me, I would feel like a young age would be a good fit for an increase in metabolic rate. And D, decrease in lean body mass. So, decrease in lean body mass would mean that we're going to have a decrease in basal metabolic rate here too. Was there any confusion on this question? Do you have questions? Post them into the chat if you think you've got something to ask about. Maybe it's about how nicotine influences things, how obesity might change this kind of idea. Anything that comes to mind, starvation, anorexia, what pops into your mind as a question you might have? And if it doesn't, then you better get ready for your next question. Good. Now I'm going to keep an eye on the chat if there are questions that pop into there. If they come in late, I'll definitely get those addressed, no problem. Just make sure if you have them prepared, drop them in there so I can really put my brain to work. Now, let's give you 30 seconds on this next question here. Good, folks. Right at that 30-second mark. I'll give you a few more seconds to work through those and then drop your best answer into the chat that you got. All right, so I'm going to start working through this one now. A, B, C, and D. Which of the following foods are allowed for those with celiac disease? Okay, first off, I have to tap into my brain about what celiac disease is. Autoimmune disorder where it causes intestinal damage as a result of eating wheat, gluten byproducts. Okay, so I'm looking for the things that don't contain wheat or gluten in that case. Let's see what we have here. A, malt based coffee beverage. Malt based coffee beverage. Maybe I can put a little question mark by that for right now. B, seitan stir fry. Now, the stir fry is not a problem, but the seitan would be because seitan is wheat based. Okay. So I know that seitan contains wheat. So that would mean it would not be allowed or not be recommended for celiac disease. I'm going to rule B out because of that. C, buckwheat with tofu. Okay, let's put a little question mark by that one. I'm not totally sure. D, a sandwich on rye bread. Hmm. Sandwich on rye bread. Well, of those gluten containing grains, I know there's wheat, there's barley, and then there's rye, as well as many others. But rye bread would still contain wheat in it. And so to me, this would be a bad answer. Let's get rid of D here together, folks. All right, so now we're looking at just the options we have. So this is great because we have our 50-50 shot. It's where we want to be. For A, malt-based coffee beverages, or C, buckwheat with tofu. For A, malt-based coffee beverages would be malt, right? And I think of malt, and malt, I believe, is either made of wheat or contains gluten. So really, I think A would be a bad fit. C, buckwheat with tofu. Well, this is my only answer left at this point, right? So even though it says wheat in it, I think it's going to be our best answer. Let's click over and let's see what we end up with. It would, in fact, be C as our best answer for number two here. And the key point to that, RD to B, is the fact that even though it says buckwheat, it does not contain wheat. So that's always a very common confusion for students all the time. Even I even have interns and students that have celiac disease that still get mixed up with that. So buckwheat, even though it says wheat, does not contain wheat at all. So kind of confusing, I know there. For A, that would be a malt-based coffee beverage that would contain wheat. Seitan for B would also contain wheat, and rye bread would also contain wheat. As you're thinking of your questions, and I want to see those dropped into the chat, take a look at our list of what we kind of have here as far as wheat containing grains. Take a look at that list. Let's review it a little bit. So A would be wheat or wheat products similar to the seitan or just wheat berries, for instance. B would be bulgur. Bulgur is made of wheat. C is barley. Barley commonly used to make things like beer and certain beverages. So we know that's the reason why most beers. Good. That's the reason why most beers end up doing that. Good. Couscous, rye. These are going to be our next ones here. Farro, kamut, semolina, and triticale. These would be all of your wheat containing grains or wheat based grains here. Okay, looks like we're still doing good here. Good, good. Awesome. Glad to hear it. So I didn't see any questions in the chat, which means all of you, now that you've kind of, been in practice, went through school, you must be feeling pretty good about your wheat containing grains, or maybe you've just been tricked one too many times and you're not going to be tricked again. Great answers here, folks. Love what everyone's posting into the chat here. So nice job. Let's give you question number 3 here. Okay. A little math, get that calculator working. So take your 30 seconds. Okay, you're right at that 30-second mark, folks. So you should be kind of starting to wrap up, work through the question here. Good. I see some answers rolling in here. Okay, looking good. All right, a dietitian meets with a mother and her 7 month old infant that weighs 11 kilograms. The infant would require how many kcals per day? Okay, so how do we go about this one, folks? Help me out just a little bit. Can you remind me how many kcals per kilogram would be required for a 7th month old? So we have kind of differences in kcals as far as this goes. So can you remind me how many kcals per kilogram would be required for a 7th month old? What would that recommendation be that you think there? Kilocalories per kilogram. What did you all think of? Good, good. So I see some answers rolling into the chat here of 98 kcals per kilogram. So we're going to put 98 right there. Now, that's just kind of standard for a 7th month old in that case, right? So we'll kind of talk through those values a little bit here in a second. So if I have 98 kcals per kilogram, I'm going to take 98 times 11 kilograms. Okay, let me just break my math down a little bit clearer for you folks. Sorry about that. So we have 98 kcals for every 1 kilogram, right? Then we're going to multiply that by 11 kilograms over 1. Kilograms will cross themselves out. So we would do 98 times 11. And when we do that, we would end up with 1,078 kcals right there. So when I look at A, B, C, and D, A, 1,080 looks pretty close. B, 1,200 looks a little bit high, actually. So I don't think that's a good fit. C, 950, much too low. And D, 275, way too low. So if I was to look between our four answers, I would say I would agree with all of you that answer A is our best fit. And it certainly is. Answer A will be the correct answer for that one there. So, that being said, let's kind of map out a little bit just to remind ourselves of those common numbers that we should be familiar with when it comes to calculating those infant needs for kcals. First off, 0 to 6 months. This infant would get, what would it be? This would be 108 kcal, right? Confirm that for me, folks. So 0 to 6 month old, we're going to have 108 kcals per kilogram, right? So it's 108. Then at 6 to 12 months, we see a drop down. It drops down to 98 kcals. So what you can see within these numbers is we're seeing consistencies of 108, 98. So just a difference of 10 calories over that period of time. Not very much, right? They're increasing in weight very rapidly. They do need calories, but it's not like it takes a big spike. Then for some reason, whenever they're kind of 12 months, and up, that's when it's going to go ahead and jump back up. So it jumps back up to 102 kcals at that point. So it goes 108, 98, 102. It kind of levels off. It goes spike, dip, and right in the middle between the two, which isn't too hard to really remember. I feel like you see kind of even numbers repeating all through here as well. Why does it drop, Lucy? Well, I think, we can think of a few different reasons that it could be. In that 0 to 6 month Lucy, we can probably say that that's the highest amount of growth that the baby goes through, right? Like most rapid amount of growth requiring the most amount of calories. Then in 6 to 12 months, they're still growing quite rapidly, of course, and their calories haven't dropped that much. But maybe, for instance, they're going to lose some of that baby fat during that period. So maybe their needs aren't as high because fat's not as metabolically active, right? So that would be kind of maybe one reason I could think of is like, hey, they're losing some of their baby fat, so they're not having as much metabolic tissue that would require the energy in that case. And then maybe at 12 months, then once they're walking, well, now their activity level has really, really jumped up and they're still growing, right? So it kind of makes sense to me as like, okay, they require more calories due to the mobility they're having. And that's secondly due to that rapid growth beyond a year, too. It's a good question, Lucy. Really good one. Love those types of questions, folks. Keep those coming. All right, keep that calculator out for me. Let's go through this next question together, okay? Go ahead and take your 30 seconds just to get started with it on your own, and then we'll look together. Good. You're right around 30 seconds, folks. Plenty of time to work through the question, so keep giving that a read and see which numbers you need or don't need. Make sure you look at that. Okay, I'm going to start giving this a little read here. Calculate the food cost per meal using the following values: operating cost, meals served, food cost, and labor cost. What I've always really said is, as I look through these numbers, I first really jump out, especially with the calculation, and I say, what are they asking me for? It's so key there. So let's remember that we highlighted up here that said food cost per meal, right? Food cost per. Now, a little tip, whenever you see the word per is another way of saying divided by. Okay, so it's like saying food cost divided by meals. Okay, so that starts by kind of setting the stage of what numbers do I need? What don't I need here? This is really helpful, whether it's labor cost per meal, whatever it is, selling price, you name it. Really helps to set you up here. So as I look at this, I go, well, operating cost, that's not going to be in the food cost to me. So I'm going to get that one out of there. I'm just going to cross it out or not even pay attention to it. Meals served. Well, meals served, I think I'm going to plug this in right below here because I need to know the food cost per meal. And I have 5,000 meals. So I'm going to keep that. Food cost. No, I need that. $5,600. Okay. And then labor cost. Do I need to include that into here? Not necessarily. Labor cost is going to be ruled out as well in this case. So I'm just left with those two numbers. 5,600, 5,600 divided by 5,000 meals, When I plug that into my calculator, and I recommend you use the calculator when you want to confirm your work, I ended up with $1.12 per meal. Okay. Very important to keep your numbers consistent there. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Great question there. Great comment in the chat just about the per. Like the per, this helps you because a lot of us, when we see the calculation, we panic, right? We have that initial panic of, oh my God, I'm not going to do well. Like that's what the feeling. But I want you to fall back on safe things like this. This is your safety net of what you know. So knowing like per means divided by, I can guarantee 100% of the time it's going to work, right? When we're talking about per of something, right? So fall back on those safety nets of, okay, even if I don't feel confident, here's what I know. Okay, so really great observation there. So yes, everyone, this will be the best way that we will go through for food cost per meal here. And I loved a lot of the answers that I saw in the chat there. I thought you all did really excellent. Did anyone do it a different way? Was this the best way of kind of going through that? And remember, for some people, this might feel easy, but it doesn't have to. For those of us that feel like it feels difficult every time we do it, that's okay. We don't need to be perfect. We just need to be competent enough for exam day. That's all you got to be. Yes, Laura. So in this case, the reason I would not have done the labor cost is just because it specifically asked for the food cost for me. Okay. So when it's specifying food cost, it's just looking at the food cost. If if Laura, if it had said, for instance, the total cost, well then like total cost per meal, let's say, Laura. Well, I'm probably going to be using most of these costs here to do that, right? Because it specified the total or all of the costs included. But because in the question it just said food cost, I'm only going to include food cost. Same way if it said the labor cost per meal. If it said labor cost per meal, then guess what? The food cost isn't going to even be included at all. It's just looking at the labor cost. So I always find it's really important to look for what are they specifying and what do we focus on. Great question, Laura. Good, good, good. I see you ruled that out really quickly there, Laura. You're like, nope, not going to get tricked by that. Good on you. Good job. All right, everyone, looking good. Let's pull up number 5 here. Number 5. Got a new one lined up for you. Okay, folks, you're about 30 seconds in with this question. So start generating your thoughts together and make sure you're looking at those answers to find your best one here. If you're confused, remember, try to rule out 2 of these answers. I think there's 2 of them that are really easy to rule, not really easy, but are easy enough to rule out compared to the other ones. Just come to your best answer there. Okay, let's look at this one together here. If the community nutritionist needed information about residents who are at least 65 years or older, the best source of existing information would be the A, B, C, or D? A, the Department of Health and Human Services. Okay, I'm going to hold on to that. B, the Department of Agriculture or the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I don't think USDA is going to be involved with that one there. C, the Food and Drug Administration. I also don't think that they would be our best person for information about residents who are at least 65 years or older. I don't think that would be our best fit there. Indeed, administration on community living. Okay, so administration on community living, definitely going to help older adults when it comes to that, because we think of like maybe some community services or things like that that could be involved there as it goes through. Okay, so if I look between these two answers and I look at Department of Health and Human Services, and I think of administration on community living, to me, it's a coin flip kind of between it. Like I don't feel better about one versus the other. So if I was to choose my best answer, I'm feeling like A, Department of Health and Human Services is going to be my best agency when it comes to that there, as far as it goes. Okay, let's skip ahead here. So with number five, I felt like A was going to be my best fit with this one here. We ruled out B and we ruled out C as far as that goes here. Now, let's talk about this A and D a little bit and make sure we understand kind of the differences between the two of them as we go through. Okay. So here's one first thing: the administration on community living is underneath Department of Health and the DHHS. Okay. So this is under DHHS. So they're not necessarily like separate kind of things that are being included, right? This is just kind of all this is. For the Administration for Community Living, the specific stuff that it focuses on, it's solely dedicated to helping older adults, helping them, and people of all ages. Okay, with disabilities in their homes rather than institutional settings. Okay. And then the Department of Health and Human Services, kind of like the big overarching thing, right? But one thing that they would be in charge of, because they still do all the funding and all of the things that are necessary for that, is Department of Health and Human Services is going to be the one that does like, state grants, direct local services. They're going to be kind of the big ones that are included there when it comes to that. So, Department of Health and Human Services, that's where I would say you want to actually go for your information about the residents who are at least 65 years and older. And I'd say the administration on community living would maybe be more of like where we would direct them to find resources, if that makes sense. So D would be better about, hey, here's kind of the community living space of where you would find the resources. DHHS would probably be where you're going to find the necessary information. So I see why a lot of us found D on there. I see why a lot of us landed on A when it comes to that. I could see it kind of go both ways, but I think as far as what my best source would be DHHS in general, just because I think it's going to really hit all of the residents who are 65 and older, not just D, which would be like older adults, people of all ages with disabilities type of a thing. But I could see it both ways there. Okay, good. Just for sake of time, folks, I'm going to keep us rolling a little bit here. I look forward to some of those questions on that one for sure. Let's keep that calculator out just for a little bit longer. And I want you to try number six. Okay, number six might be a little bit of a different one than you're used to. So let's look at that one. Good. About 40 seconds into this question, so make sure you're starting to get something on paper here. Good. Okay. So I'm going to start working through this a little bit on my own here. Now, we've done some calculations practice similar to this before. I really encourage you, if you haven't, go onto the RD Exam Ready YouTube page, go check out some of the lives we've done, see what these lessons we've done before and type of examples like this we've talked through. When it comes to this, I've told you students before that there's a few ways you can go through EP and AP. Some people will do the triangle method, and some people will do what I call non triangle. I'm a non triangle person when it comes to it, but I always present it both ways. My biggest thing, if you're going to do the triangle, you have to understand all elements of it. So if you do, you're golden. If you don't, maybe listen to what I'm going to say here next. If I am a triangle person, my triangle would look like so. EP would be on top, AP would be on bottom, yield would be like so. Okay, so if you're a triangle person, that's what it is. If you're not a triangle person, here's kind of my recommendation from here. It's saying, what is the percent yield? Okay, what I need you all to remember is think about when I ask this. Is yield what I get out of the cauliflower that's edible, or is the yield the waste that I throw out? Hmm. Hmm. Well, the yield should be the edible part. That's what you're getting out of the actual product, okay? So let's think about that a little bit. If that's what I'm getting out of it, right? And it says that its purchase weight was 9.6 pounds and the edible portion was 6.2. Okay, so here's how I'd recommend setting it up. You know the yield's what you're going to get out of it. In this case, you know 6.2 pounds was the edible. The total that we started with was 9.6. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put that EP on top. Okay. And I'm going to divide by the AP. Okay. This is going to give me a percentage, a percent yield. And this is how you find the yield for many products. All the time you're calculating AP and EP, but sometimes we're not doing yield. So if we do 6.2 pounds divided by 9.6 pounds, when I divide those two, whoops, 6.2, 9.6, okay, good. I ended up with about 64.5% or 65% is what I ended up with there. So when I look at that, B looks like it's going to be my best answer when it comes to this. And here's another thing I'm going to encourage all of you to do. If you have the time on the exam, you can do this. You can check your work, right? So let's say if I wanted to check my work, see if I'm correct. If I restructured this and said, let's do my AP times my yield, I should get my EP, right? So let's test that example. Let's do my AP of 9.6 pounds times my yield of 0.65. When I do that, 0.65, good. I should end up with 6.24 or about 6.2 in that case. So that fits with my EP. Thus, what I've proven is that we are in fact right. That's going to be your best answer for answer B there. Good. While we're looking at this, questions, concerns, where did you kind of get off track a little bit? Is there a part of this you think you're not understanding? Let me know in the chat, and I'm happy to talk through EP, AP, whatever you'd like to. Doing great, students. Doing really great. Got a few more to go through tonight. Okay. I don't see too much in the chat, but I'm going to keep a lookout on that. If you want to reach out to me individually and ask about this, you totally can. Nice work, though, from what I see in the chat, everyone. Nice. Okay. Yeah, so what I kind of taught here was this was the other way. Okay. If you were a triangle person, here's what your triangle looked like. And it's the exact same thing you were setting that we set up. See how I set this up with the triangle where I took my EP divided by my AP is equal to my yield. So that would be your triangle method right there. It's exactly the same thing we did. It's just the way I set it up is I don't use the triangle for my reference. I just think through and critically think about what the yield means, meaning it's what I get out of the product. Yep. Great question there. Either way works as long as you understand it. All right, number 7 here, a little follow up from our medications talk, folks. See what you remember. Looking good. You're about 40 seconds into this question. I see some answers rolling in there. Okay, looking good. Let's start on this question a little bit together then. Which of the following medications is most affected by serum sodium levels in the blood? Okay. A, B, C, or D? When I look at A, when it comes to this one, MAOIs usually used to treat depression, and I think about some nutritional stuff that can be affected by MAOIs or things we just have to watch out a little bit, right? However, when I kind of think of it here, do we think of sodium when it comes to MAOIs? Not necessarily. I don't think that that's going to be with sodium there. So I'm going to rule out answer A here. It just doesn't feel like a good fit with sodium to me. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. B, corticosteroids. Corticosteroids. Once again, when I kind of look at that, I don't really think much about when it comes to sodium. I think about other things that it influences, especially things like, weight and blood sugar, but I don't really think of things like sodium. So I'm going to rule out answer B on there. I don't think it'll be my best fit. C, lithium carbonate. Lithium does have something to do with sodium. I remember specifically us talking about that. So C is a good fit. I'd like to hold on to that for right now. And D, ACE inhibitors. ACE inhibitors. Well, ACE inhibitors are traditionally used to treat things like blood pressure. So maybe I'll put a little question mark by that one. Maybe I don't know enough. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to go fishing for information that's not there. If I don't think I have something concrete in my mind that is really going to stick out for something like ACE inhibitors, I don't want to go searching for it. So, therefore, I would say my best fit in this case is going to be answer C, lithium. And it, in fact, will be our best fit when it comes to that there. So here's kind of why, as I told in our description. For A, MAOIs, we have to avoid high tyramine foods. Okay, so high tyramine foods is what you're going to have to watch out for when it comes to that, but not necessarily those that sodium that we're worried about here. Corticosteroids. Corticosteroids can cause us to retain water, retain sodium. However, it's not going to be my best fit when it came to this. C would be a better fit because it's much more bound to sodium, right? So when we take lithium, we just want to maintain a consistent sodium intake when it comes to that. We don't want to underdo it. We don't want to overdo it. If you want to hear more about lithium, make sure you check out the medications lesson that we did on the YouTube page. And D, ACE inhibitors, related to sodium, but not as affected as that of lithium would be. As I said, it's factoring into blood, I almost said sugars, excuse me, blood pressure. So, like, let's say I completely cut sodium out of my diet tomorrow, right? Well, in about 6 months, I'll bet my blood pressure is going to be a little bit wonky because if I'm taking an ACE inhibitor, but I decrease my sodium intake crazy, well, then maybe what we'd expect is we might not need that ACE inhibitor. But still, if I was between C and D, by far C is going to be my best fit because it is directly related to sodium intake as far as how much of that medication will stay in the blood there. Great one there, folks. Okay, good. Just have a few to go through. This one I wanted to set up as a kind of a situational one a little bit and pick your brain there. So go ahead and take a look at there. A customer who has eaten breakfast at the cafeteria informs the dietitian that he became ill 90 minutes after eating a chicken sandwich. What should the dietitian do first? All right, let's put A, B, C, and D. A, accept responsibility and compensate them for their meal. I don't know about you all, but there's times when an answer pops up that I can just, like, you can taste it and tell it's not right, right? There's some you feel good about, some you feel bad about. And this is just one I don't feel good about. It's not appropriate to be doing that, right? So I'm going to rule out answer A. B, immediately report the complaint to the food safety officer. Okay, I don't think it's a terrible thing to do. It doesn't leave a bad taste in my mouth. Let's see what other answers look like. C, deny responsibility and ask what else they may have eaten. Well, I don't know about you. This one leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Denying responsibility, kind of victim blaming a little bit, doesn't seem like a good way to go here. So I'm going to rule out answer C in this case. D, take the complaint seriously, acquire information, and conduct an investigation. Okay, so if I'm between B and D here, I'm kind of considering both here, but I would say D feels better to me. And my reason for feeling a little better about D is, you're taking their complaints seriously, you're acquiring more information, which I think is really key in this piece. If you just immediately report the complaint to the food safety officer, you don't know what they ate, you don't know if they were a customer, you don't know when they were here. We don't really know what happened. So I think by taking it seriously, acquiring information, and then conducting an investigation is going to be a helpful way to do that, or in some way, following up with someone to conduct an investigation will be essential. So I would agree with most of you. I would say D would be our best fit for the situational number 8 here. Good. Number 9. Okay, number 9. A patient is admitted to the hospital following a hypertensive attack. The doctor asks the dietitian to provide low sodium Diet education. When offered to the patient, they state, I don't see any problem with my sodium intake and don't intend to change. What would be the best approach per the trans theoretical model? A, B, C, or D? Okay. So trans theoretical model, right? That's going to be that pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and then finally maintenance. Hopefully, we get to that point there, right? So I don't know about you, but this patient does not seem like they're very interested in changing. I don't see any problem with my sodium intake and don't intend to change. It feels as though they may be in pre contemplation to me, where they're not aware or they don't care. They're not interested in changing anytime soon. So let's keep that in mind a little bit going forward here. For A, stimulus control. Stimulus control. So that would be like your instinct to want to eat sweets, right? Or stress causing us to want to eat out or, drink, smoke, whatever it is that people are doing, right? Stimulus control would be something that's going to be good, but it's going to be good for someone more in the later stages where they're trying to avoid like regressing into bad habits. This patient doesn't seem like he's even gotten started. So to me, A feels out. To me, I don't think that's going to be a good fit for him. B, increase the patient's consciousness of their actions. Okay, I'm going to hold on to that. C, refer the patient to the educational handout if they ever have questions. Okay, I'll hold on to that. And D, reinforce the wins they have had already. What wins? Has he had any wins? I don't think he's had any wins. I'm sorry, I'm not going to give you any wins that you haven't have had yet. You don't get just deny things and say, I win. That's not how it works. So D is out for me, folks. With B or C. B, increase the patient's consciousness of their actions, or C, refer the patient to the educational handout if they ever have questions. Okay, so here's why I would rule out C. I would rule out C because when I'm looking at that, it feels very offhanded. It feels very much like, okay, here's the education, see ya. While I understand in practice, in the clinical setting, that probably happens all the time. Was my left hand, but left hand to God. I can tell you I've done that before. Absolutely. However, it's what the exam wants you to think as the best option, right? And while C could be a possibility, what B is going to do is B is going to say, hey, he is not aware of the problem. He's not aware of even how his actions may influence others. So, what B allows you to do is kind of almost confront them a little bit of, well, hey, you came to the hospital for a hypertensive attack. Don't you think your sodium intake might have contributed to that? In some way, increasing his consciousness, not blaming him, but saying, hey, if you don't like being in the hospital, you can't be eating sodium all the time. So you might not want to make changes now, but you're going to have to make changes in the future unless you want to end up back here, right? That's what makes B our best answer is it actually helps move them along the continuum so that he starts thinking through contemplation. So he starts realizing, okay, my actions are a problem and I should think at least about doing something about it, right? Yeah, Laura, I totally agree. C is kind of just blowing them off, right? I understand that that's what happens in practice all the time. However, the exam is wants you to think objectively, what's your best option there? Great one, folks. We have one more for our night here. Okay, so hopefully you saved it up here. I'll look out for any questions that may pop into the chat. Remember to join that mailing list if you haven't, if you want to get some of these notes. I am so sorry that this text is very small. Okay, very small. I'm going to take myself away and zoom in just a little bit here. Okay, be about as good as we get here. Give this one a read. Let's finish our night with that. An elderly patient is seen by the dietitian for her osteoporosis. She is inactive and does not consume dairy, fruits, vegetables, or grains. What does she eat? Following a dietary recall, she is at 50% of the DRI for calcium, vitamin C, and iron. She cannot name foods that are high in calcium or vitamin D. Which of the following is the best PES statement for this patient? Okay, so a nice little diagnostic question for us. A, B, C, or D? Okay. A, food and nutrition related knowledge deficit related to lack of prior education on bone health, as evidenced by inability to identify calcium rich foods and vitamin D sources. Okay. These all feel like true statements. Okay. I'm going to hold on to A for right now. B, inadequate energy intake related to poor appetite or restrictive eating patterns, as evidenced by weight loss and reduced bone mineral density. Off the bat, folks, this one leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and I have several reasons why. One, we do not know if she has inadequate energy intake. It never said anything about that, about her not eating enough calories. I didn't hear her say she has poor appetite at all. So I would say, or even weight loss. So I would rule that out. B is just not a good fit because they're generalizing. This is not actual data that we're finding. C, inadequate vitamin D intake, okay, related to limited dietary sources and low sun exposure, as evidenced by low serum vitamin D levels and decreased bone mineral density. Okay, I'm a little questionable on that one. And D, inadequate calcium intake related to insufficient consumption of calcium rich foods, as evidenced by dietary recall showing intake below recommended levels and diagnosis of osteoporosis. Okay. C is questionable to me, but I'm going to rule it out. I don't think it's going to be a good fit. So, right now, between A and D, folks, we're at our 50-50 shot. And here's the key point of what I want. A is a true statement, D is a true statement. Which is best? If you chose A, you are not wrong, but we need to talk about why D is the best answer here. Okay? The reason D is your best answer is because you must prioritize intake domain. Okay? Intake domain is always prioritized over the other domains. Okay. So if you recall, we are between answers A and D. A is a true statement, folks. She does have a nutrition knowledge related deficit. It is due to lack of prior education, and it is evidenced pretty well. However, D is a better answer because it's prioritizing her intake. She has inadequate calcium intake, which we saw because she is at 50% of the DRI. We know that it's insufficient consumption of calcium rich foods because she doesn't eat dairy, vegetables, grains. And the dietary recall pointed out that she's only at 50% of the DRI for calcium. Based on that, D will be your best answer, folks, because you must always prioritize the intake as long as it's there. If we didn't have any indication for the intake at all, then A would be a good fit. But because we have the intake to sell it, we know that although knowledge may be in deficit, we must prioritize what is happening through that piece as well. Okay. All right, everyone. Good, good. Okay, perfect. So I hope everyone enjoyed our lesson tonight. I hope you learned something as you went through those questions. Remember, this is all practice. So the point is you walk away feeling a little bit better about your strategy as we go through things. I always appreciate everyone's questions, good promotion. Once again, tell other studying students because I want to do these free for you. I want to give back to the students, help you all to be the best dietitians you can be. So, as always, I'm always going to sign off and say happy studying to you, RD to be, and I'll see you very